Hello and welcome to stage 2 of the Tour de l'Avenir, the race of the future, the 59th edition of this race, showcasing some of the stars of the future. Yesterday we saw a spectacular opening stage of this race. We started off in Karnak, ending up in Lagasse, and that stage was won by the man from Denmark, Anders Foldager, and incredibly he is in the breakaway today on a stage that looks like it's going to suit the sprinters. We'll deconstruct why he is in this move a little bit later on. But another little bit of housekeeping. King of the Mountains is being worn by the rider from Luxembourg, Loic Bettendorf. Also up in the mix in the points classification, well, keeping it warm for Anders of Foldager, is Giacomo Villa, one of the riders in the breakaway. I can tell you that the break earlier today did contain another rider, young Alexander Vinokourov, of course, the son of the Alexander Vinokourov, riding for the Kazakh team. Once they'd crested the only King of the Mountains today, he actually fell back. But today the race started in Nozay, in Loire Atlantique, and we're basically heading into the region of Indre-et-Loire, and we're finishing in the historic, beautiful, picturesque town of Chinon. A gently undulating day, hardly any ripples at all. As I said before, only one fourth category climb, one sprint as well. No tone bonuses on offer. And the race this year offering up none of those, because there are plenty of opportunities for this race to be split apart as we look at the peloton currently being led by the Mexican team. Also in the mix as well, the Swiss squad, United States of America, also chasing. As you will see, all of the teams here, bar from two, are national squads, and you will be familiar with these jerseys if you recently watched the World Championships, of course. And the other two teams are regional squad from France, the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes team, and we also have the UCI WCC team as well, featuring riders from various nations who ordinarily don't quite have the same support of their national federation, so giving them an opportunity to showcase their talents today. As we look at the general classification, Anders Foldager in the yellow jersey on your screens leads this race. It was a fascinating race yesterday. The peloton eventually closed up to within 5 seconds, and there's confirmation of the Meilleur Grimpeur, King of the Mountains, Loic Bettendorf, in the breakaway yesterday, storing 7 points. He'll be wearing that again at the end of today. Only one fourth category climb. He'll be wearing it actually until the end of tomorrow as well, into stage 4, because tomorrow we have a team time trial. Foldager, as you can see, leading in green. But because of the Frenchman in second place, he's leading the white jersey competition. Pierre Thierry won't be keeping that one. There we go. You can just see our two leaders relaying through. The other rider in the move today, and it's a bold move, it really is the 18-year-old Aljaz Turk of the Slovenian squad. And there we go. Pierre Thierry leads the young rider competition. This is a race, of course, for the under-23s, but within that there is still a young rider competition for riders born either in 2003 and 2004, so a separate young rider competition within this race of the future. Now alongside me to run the rule over the riders today and perhaps try and deconstruct why we have the Maillot Jaune in the breakaway is Jens Dekker. Jens, love to have you alongside me again today. Should be another very interesting stage, and I must admit, when I looked at the race details earlier on and saw that this man who took the stage yesterday, his 4th win of the year, was in the move on a stage with a profile like this, I was left scratching my head. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting move by Foldager and by the Danish team as well. There are a couple possible explanations, but I think the most logical one is Foldager obviously won that stage in a breakaway. He is not a pure sprinter, so it's going to be hard to see him compete for the stage win, and I think this is going to take all the pressure off him and his team. There is a possibility that if he was in the peloton, there might have been a bigger break up the road, a break possibly that the Danish team would have to chase down, and this way that is not happening. So it's just one rider killing his legs for the next couple of days, but yeah, it's a very well, it's not a very efficient way to do it, maybe by being in the break all day with just one other rider, but he's chosen to do it, and well, he's showing off the jersey in the best way possible.
No, he certainly is. It's very interesting tactic that has played out today, and they've got a lead of 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Again, the direction of travel for the stage today, similar to yesterday, where we started in Carnac to Gassy, up in Brittany. We're now moving through gradually through the centre of France. We end up in the climbs in the Alps of the Auvergne region of the Alps. Absolutely gorgeous part of the world. That's where we have traditionally over the last few years finished this race, taking in some mighty alpine climbs, including the Col de Loze. That is later in the week, but right now we're heading through tomorrow's stage. We'll actually end up in the centre of this beautiful country. It's a nagging little headwind today, so there are little sections of crosswind, but for the vast majority of the day the riders will have that headwind. They're still moving along pretty briskly, but they are on the slowest schedule. You can just see on the top left there, that's the distance still to go. No circuits today. We had 3 finishing circuits. It really animated the race yesterday. I'll go through with you exactly what happened. Foldega, as I said before, took the stage ahead of Giacomo Villa. Pierre Thierry was the first of the French home. A local rider, in fact, from the region that the race passed through yesterday. In 4th place was Mikhail Pomorski, and in 5th place, Loic Bettendorf of Luxembourg. 5th place on the day for him, but the recompense was, of course, a day in the King of the Mountains jersey. And then leading the bunch sprint home in 6th place was Roten 10 of Israel. And then the likes of Pickrell, Van Melken, Bussato and Donaldson also up in the mix. Now, looking at the peloton chasing here, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, a long way to go, Jens. Mexico, interesting to see those guys up in the mix. What do you know about that particular team? Clearly, you'd imagine they have somebody who they're going to protect and ride for in the sprint today. But again, it's a team I don't know too much about. Can you cast any light on that one for us?
Yeah, it's difficult to imagine who it's going to be who's doing the sprint for the Mexican team. There might be someone with fast legs. I personally don't have any clue who it's going to be. They have one rider who's been reported on recently, Isaac Del Toro. He's a second-year under-23, already finished 20th in a cross world championship in the under-23s last year. And also this year he finished some really strong races, 10th in the CBU Tour, which is a pro race, also 10th in the Peace Race, and even finished on the podium in the Valle d'Aosta, which is one of the more prestigious climbing races. So he might be someone for the GC. I don't really see him competing in the sprint today, but apparently they've got someone, because they are riding, but there's a lot of nations cooperating at the front of the peloton. I see at least maybe 4 or 5 nations with riders up there trying to catch this breakaway, and we did see a breakaway win yesterday. It's going to be very hard for these two to repeat that feat.
Yep, it's a straight-in finish today. There is a slight loop at the end. They actually passed not too far from the finishing line with about 8 Ks to go. Then they do a loop just to the north of the beautiful town of Chinon. Can't wait to show you what that's like. It is absolutely stunning, really historic, and has obtained World Heritage Site status from 2000. And Henry II actually lived there in the castle, the Chateau de Chinon, which overlooks the beautiful river, the River Vienne, known of course for its wine as well, this particular place. But that's about 73 Ks to go still. As the man in the yellow jersey, we get a really close look at him. It was a superb performance yesterday. We know he's a very fast finisher. 4th win of the year, including a stage win in the Giro Next Generation. Also a silver medalist back in 2020 in the eSports World Championships on Zwift as well. He's a name that I know probably more from the eSports world than the road scene, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this rider as he moves up to World Tour next year. He's very, very impressive, isn't he? Seemingly pretty versatile too, Jens.
Yeah, he does seem to have his sort of speciality in finishing off breakaways, and that's a useful skill in the pro ranks. We've got a couple of breakaways coming for him next year, probably. Maybe not the biggest rider in any clear speciality, but those breakaways are very useful to have that skill of getting there to the finish with a small group and then finishing it off. And he's done it in the 2 biggest U23 races this year. So I'm really excited to see him try that next year at the pro level.
He rides at the amateur level or the continental level for the Italian team, Biesse Carrera. And he actually had his teammate with him, Giacomo Villa, who was second on the stage. So both teammates finishing first and second, obviously for their respective nations, but both would have known each other very well. And that may have had something to do with them opting to go in that early move, which ultimately held on, albeit by a very slender margin. A little bit of a lack of cooperation in the final, saw that gap shut down. But it was an interesting finish, wasn't it? There wasn't that much organisation at all. There were riders that we thought would have saved themselves for the sprint Jens. One in particular was Luke Lamperty. We also saw another breakaway or a little counter-attack go from the bunch yesterday with Max Walker, who's another very good sprinter from the Great Britain team. It had the feeling of more of a one-day race as we look at as the bunch being led here.
Yeah, it was a very chaotic race, which is customary for these under-23 races. I do expect some more control today. You see it with multiple teams really cooperating at the front of the peloton. This is the most clear sprint stage. I think any team that has brought a sprinter to this race really wants to capitalize on that today. And you see it just controlling the peloton. We see Canada, we see the USA. We saw Mexico at the front as well. Germany seems to be up there, as well as Israel. Those were all the teams with, well, most of the teams anyway have the biggest sprinters in this race. Think of Lamperty. The Israeli guys have Kogut and the winner of the bunch sprint yesterday, Rotentene. Pickrell is one of those riders for Canada, so that's sort of the riders we expect today. And it seems like all the teams have decided to control this one for the sprint.
Yeah, it's holding steady at the moment. And the more, when you look at what's to come in this race, when you look at the condition and the shape that Foldager has held, it still seems to be a bit of a mystery to me. I'd really like to get his view on things in relation to why they're doing what they're doing, because, okay, it's forcing other teams to chase, but tomorrow we have a really crucial stage. Every stage of this race, of course, is crucial to varying degrees, but in particular tomorrow there will be significant time gaps. There's no time bonuses out on the road for any road stage, no intermediate sprints, no time bonus at the finish, but tomorrow will be the first time where there could be some big splits, because we have a team time trial 26.5 k's long. And looking at the lineup for Denmark, I mean, this is one of their key riders, and clearly an exceptionally capable rider, but as you alluded to, is essentially just wasting strength, isn't he? He had a hard day yesterday, he's doubled up today for no apparent reason, but I'm sure there's some method. I'm sure he wouldn't have just attacked willy-nilly and got in this move. But when you look at the team time trial tomorrow, that's one less rider you'd imagine. He's going to be slightly impaired, you'd thought, in that team time trial tomorrow, especially the distance, 26.5 k's. It's going to be exceptionally intense.
Yeah, this is not the best move if you want to perform tomorrow. He's going to have some sore legs tomorrow, that's for sure. But you have to imagine maybe this wasn't the plan to be in a move of two riders. It was initially three, of course. I think probably the same as yesterday. The Danish team wanted riders in the breakaway, and Foldager stepped up to the mark. He got in the breakaway. It took about 10 kilometers today to form that breakaway, so there is a chance, of course, that they were just attacks, and he was one of the riders attacking. It just ended up that this group stuck with the three of them. But he is discussing things with the DS in the car right now, so maybe we'll see a change in his tactics. I think now he's committed. He's going to ride this out till the finish, but it doesn't really look like they're riding as hard as they can, like we saw yesterday. The speed is a bit lower. It is, of course, a headwind, but I don't think they're committing full gas to this one. They're just trying to control it, betting that the peloton won't chase them down immediately, and maybe saving a bit for the final, see if they can speed up towards the end and hold on that way.
Yeah, it is a bold move. As I said, the wind isn't in their favour, save actually for the last 4.5k, where they do this little loop around the town. They pass through the finish line, not directly through it, but they'll be able to see it just over to the right-hand side. They do this loop around, and then for the last 4.5 kilometres, they will pick up that gentle tailwind. It's not overly blowy today. As you can see, they're moving along pretty quickly, but just by the way that the riders are lined up here, slight little bit of overlap because the wind is actually coming across their left shoulder but in the nose, and when you have a wind like that, it's always going to be in favour of the peloton. And this is a really continued conversation. There's a lot being said here because it's a pretty big deal. He's committed. We've got 68 k's to go. He's got nothing more than showing the jersey out in front, and you really do have to think hard about what they're going to gain here, don't you? And that's why I think we've got this conversation going on. But again, you're in the yellow jersey, one other rider with you. It also doesn't look great to just pull the pin and drop back, does it?
No, it doesn't look great. It might be the best decision here, but you see how he's riding. He's on the hoods. He's not really in that aero position. I doubt he's really going as hard as he can at this point. So I think that must be the tactic. Just well, it's not an easy ride, of course. It's still really hard, but it's not as hard as it could be. So that's probably what I would do in this situation. Just try to ride as slow as possible while still maintaining a gap, and then try to speed up probably through that town with about 10 kilometers to go. That would be the best tactic, but it's very hard to see this working.
Yeah, 2:25, 67.8 k's to go. The Swiss riding on the front again. They were doing a lot of the riding earlier to pursue the five-man move that went clear yesterday along with the German team. And they're doing it again today, but with the addition of several other squads. Far more cohesion as we see this conversation continuing between the Dane and the Slovenian. One of the youngest riders in the race, only 18 years of age, is Aliaz Turk. So 3 or 4 years between these riders. So it just shows amongst the, even through the under-23s, there's still a broad range, and it's accentuated, isn't it? And that's why we've got this separate white jersey classification, even though it's an under-23 race. Just to acknowledge the fact, although times are changing and we are seeing riders far more physiologically developed than before, still an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old, there's going to be some big differences there, isn't there? In fact, quite a gulf.
Yeah, I think we're looking here at one rider who's moving up to World Tour next year, and a rider who's just fresh off the juniors, basically, which is a pretty big difference. And that's the dynamic. I think the Slovenian rider is just going to be learning as much as possible from the more experienced Danish rider.
Yeah, the gap coming down a little bit now. As you say, I think that that long conversation that he had with his team manager, Trek Sportief, I think it's one of their DSs anyway. The head DS is Anders Lund, former pro. Unsurprisingly, was, I think you're quite right, rather than just pull the pin and sit back, that doesn't look great. The optics look poor. I think they're just maybe knocking it off and just rolling along as much as they can. And as long as he's holding a little bit back and he's not taxing himself too much, it does mean that the Danish team, as you say, can actually look back. But Jens, when you look at the Danish team and when you look at Danish cycling over the last few years, I mean, they've had disproportionately good results for the size of the population. They are a real force. But amongst the Danish teams, save for Foldega out in front on his own, for the stage win today, who would you be looking at for the sprint for that squad?
Yeah, I don't really think they have a pure sprinter. I think Joshua Goodneitz might be their fastest man. Don't think he's maybe fast enough to beat the strongest sprinters in this race, but we'll have to see. It's not the biggest field in terms of sprinters, so there is always a possibility for a surprise. They have got Simon Dalby, who's probably the GC rider for their team. Also, again, not the biggest favorite, but they've got a strong team, though, with Gustav Wang, Carl Fredrik Bevort, all riders who've, I think both of those have won a time trial world championship in the various categories over the years. Adam Holm Jorgensen was a stage winner here last year, so it is a really strong team, but they don't have the pure GC rider or the pure sprinter, so they'll have to look for opportunities in other places.
Oh, good shot there of the two main groups. Our two leaders, Foldega, who is the race leader as well. If you're just joining us, welcome to stage 2 of the Tour de l'Avenir. And yes, this isn't a mountain stage, this is a flat sprint stage. I use the word loosely, inverted commas, as the conversation continues between our two riders out in front. Turk having a bit of a conversation here. Again, another long chat here about what exactly they do. And just behind, we have the American squad on the front. That is Ian Lopez riding hard. We've got the Israel team sat in P3 as well. Just behind, we have the German squad. 28 teams in total in the Tour de l'Avenir this year. And as the gap steadies at around 2 minutes, we might as well go through what's on the menu for the rest of the week, because as you would expect, with it being essentially a mini Tour de France, there is a little bit of everything. We started in Karnak and we headed to Garcia yesterday, stage took by Foldega. And today we're heading towards Chinon. Tomorrow, as we've mentioned, there is a 26.5 kilometre team time trial from Vatin to Issoudun. And then at stage 4, it gets a little bit hilly. Not super hilly, but I would say a stage for the puncheurs. We start in Aigrand and we end up in Evreux-les-Bains, over 150 k's. We are heading into La Creuse region. Stage 5, Again, it's a punchy finish, 2 third category climbs to end with, and we start in La Tour de Salvagny and we head up to Lac Aigues-et-Bellettes. That's a stage of 138.3 kilometers. Next up on the menu, it's our first mountaintop finish. That's stage 6. It's a short one, but I tell you what, it is not sweet. It's only 68.5 Ks. We start in Méribel and we do a loop. We finish in Méribel, but we finish up the Col de la Loze, and that will be the highest point of the Tour de l'Avenir at 2,296 meters. It's a big, big stage. It really is. 23 Ks at 7.4%. And we saw, well, an action-packed stage at the Tour de France earlier this year. And then, stage 7, get ready for this. It is a split stage, proper old school. We have an 11.1 kilometer time trial on Saturday morning, which is essentially a hill climb. And we end up at Montrichard-Albin. And then in the afternoon, we have another brute of a stage, another short one, 69.6 Ks. And we start in Montrichard-Albin, and we end up in Val-Cenis, and we finish just over the top of the Col du Mont-Cenis. And then the final stage of the race is another absolute brute, including the Col de Izerin, the all-category ascent. We start in Val-Cenis and we end up in Saint-Foy-d'Arentez. So that's what is on the menu. And the final stage, again, short, 99.6 Ks. But I tell you what, that is where the race will be settled. So I think there's a real balance to this week. It just gets increasingly harder and harder and harder. But Jens, there's something there for every sort of rider to shine, and this is essentially what the Tour de l'Avenir is about, isn't it?
Yeah, the organisers always try to get a good sort of view of what the best riders on certain terrain are. So you've got the 2 sprint stages at the start, we've got the team time trial, and then it gets more mountainous towards the end of the week, with a couple of hill stages in between as well. So that's what the Tour de l'Avenir is. It's just trying to get a view of who the big talents are coming through towards the World Tour.
Yeah, well, as we go through this race, we'll get to know a few more riders here. There's a few that you might be familiar with. There's a couple that have already riding at World Tour level or riding in development teams, but having the opportunity to ride bigger races. Unfortunately, if you missed yesterday's stage, you're expecting to see one of the brightest young stars in the sport, the Norwegian Johannes Stone Mittet. Unfortunately, he started yesterday's stage and had to withdraw through illness, so a big blow for the Tour de l'Avenir. He was the winner of the Giro Next Gen this year, of course, and was on the podium last year, the runner-up. So the Norwegian team already down by 1, but I'm sure they'll reconfigure and focus elsewhere in this race. But it will be interesting because I know Jens, you've got quite a deep knowledge, relatively deep knowledge of the junior scene and the under-23 scene. But for us, this will be the first time that we'll be seeing a lot of these riders really showing themselves. It's a proper shop window, and this is the first time that we've actually shown the Tour de l'Avenir from the start to the finish as well. So a real opportunity to get to know some of the faces that will be familiar on our screens on GCN Plus and in Eurosport in the coming years.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know the exact stats, but if you look through the last couple of years, you'll recognize a lot of riders in the list of stage winners, in the list of GC podiums. There's a huge amount of riders in the World Tour. There's very few riders who actually win a stage or get the podium on the GC in this race who don't go on to do great things at the World Tour level. So it's really, as you say, the shop window for everyone who's well, if you're interested in cycling, if you're interested in sort of one-upping your friends and knowing all the new talents coming through, then this is the race to be.
That certainly is. Some real stars of the sport have won the Tour de l'Avenir in the past. As the youngest rider in the break of 2 takes a little bit of a stretching out the back, especially on a flat stage like this. Sometimes it's actually quite nice when you hit a small climb, just to recruit some different muscles. But he heads back through to the front. They're certainly not giving up yet. I certainly think they are clearly holding something back here. They picked up the pace on this ever so slight bit of downhill, but some of the winners we've had in the past, the opening, or the first ever edition of this race was won by Guido Di Rosso back in 1961. And then through the years, we've had the likes of Joop Zoetemelk, fellow Dutchman, took that in 1969. And we've had Giambattista Baroncelli, and as we're moving into the modern era, Greg LeMond Miguel Indurain, Laurent Fignon, and in recent years, well, some of the real superstars of the sport. Last year it was Sian Uterbrooks who took the win for Belgium. Tobias Foss has taken the win in 2019. Tadej Pogacar, the little-known Tadej Pogacar, took it in 2018. Egan Bernal in 2017. But just take a look through the list of riders who have won stages, who have won the race, and who've sat on the podium. It is a who's who of cycling. This really is an enormously important race, and the biggest race on the calendar for the under-23 riders as well. And we're treated to seeing the race pretty much in its entirety as we get another look, another study of our two leaders. Anders Foldager riding for Denmark, sat in second wheel, and then the youngster on the front, the 18 years of age man from Slovenia, Turk, just rolling through there on this beautiful sunny day. It's pretty hot actually. It's around 29 degrees in Chinon, so a real hot summer's day. So making sure that they're taking enough fluids on board is absolutely vital. And worth reminding everybody as well, Jens, that there's no communication, there's no radios. These riders have got no radios at all. They can drop back to the team car if they wish to speak to their DSs, but I think that's what gave, or that's what lends itself to this slightly different feel in the racing. There's clearly a plan, but these riders are really learning so fast and so quickly about what to do in a dynamic race situation. I think it's actually important that they're not on radios.
Yeah, they aren't on radios, and that has probably led to that breakaway win yesterday, at least in part. Of course, there were strong riders there, but that sort of lack of control that definitely results from having no radios is just very difficult to adjust plans on the fly. You can have your plan, but then if the brake rides a little bit faster or a little bit slower, you don't really know what to do unless you've figured it out in your own head while racing. And you know, in the pro ranks, of course, there is a DS in your ear who's telling you exactly what to do if all the radios are working correctly. That's not the case here, so they have to rely on either a team captain or just their own knowledge of tactics, and well, this is really the way to develop that sense of tactics before you actually enter the World Tour or a pro team.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the reason why radios have been taken out. It's so they can learn that racecraft. I've got nothing against radios in the World Tour at all, as the riders are just directed left off the main road as they take that corner at a pace. And they're moving pretty quickly here. There are some sections where we're primarily heading in an easterly direction or a southeasterly direction today, as we cut through the very centre of France and end up down in the southeast in the Alps. But there are some sections of the road today where they will pick up a little bit of a cross tailwind, and by the looks of the pace that they're riding at here, Jens, they probably have picked up just a gentle tailwind at the moment.
Yeah, also looks like it's a little bit downhill maybe, so the speed's higher again. Makes it a little bit easier for these breakaway riders to stay out front, but again, the general direction is definitely a headwind. It's a cross headwind, but it's still a headwind. So the speed is not as high as it could be, and that makes it generally easier for the peloton to catch up, especially if it's only two riders up front.
You know, there is the bunch behind, still being led by the German team. Good long pull on the front here. I think you're quite right, that was just a gentle descent, and now kicking up. Impressive riding here by the youngster from Slovenia. Of course, no doubt inspired by the antics of the likes of Tadej Pogacar and of course Primož Roglic, who took another win the other day. The Vuelta starts on Saturday. You can see all of that action live on GCN Plus and on Eurosport, of course, and on Discovery Plus too. Cannot wait for that one to start. And who knows, a couple of these riders, without a shadow of a doubt, will be riding their debut Grand Tours. And there is one rider in this race, Jens, isn't there, who's already got a Grand Tour under his belt?
Yeah, one of the favourites for this race from the United States of America, Matthew Riccitello. He's done the Giro d'Italia this year, and he's come back to the U23 scene to try to win Tour de l'Avenir as well. Yeah, he's one of the contenders, definitely. There are a couple more, but he's up there on that list of favourites.
And while we look at this lead now stabilised, well, actually they've taken back 10 seconds or so. And at the speed they're going here, really forcing that bunch to chase. But I do think still the chances of our two surviving out in front, they were three. Alexander Vinokourov was there. He decided to pull the pin after he took maximum points on the only King of the Mountains of the day. That took place at around half distance on the Côte du Saint-Arbin. Took the points there and decided to go back, and immediately increased the workload by a very large percentage for our two riders out in front. I'm sure they must have offered him a few francs, maybe, or a few francs, going back here, a few euros, maybe to stay in front. But he took the option to drop back, so the chances of survival are slim. But the longer they stay out in front, the more the peloton behind, of course, have to chase. So I'm sure there must be a plan that has been hatched by the Danish team, as it is the German squad still setting that rhythm on the front. Canada not too far behind. Riley Pickrell was their best placed rider yesterday. Watch out for Michael Leonard for the overall. Not certainly a stage for Leonard today, but do watch out for Pickrell. He's up in the top 10 in the bunch sprint behind our 5 breakaway riders yesterday. But yeah, just looking ahead towards the stages that I've talked about, and if we can maybe just drill down a little bit into some of the big pre-race favourites. You just go through maybe 5 or 6 riders, the standout riders who you think could be potential podium contenders for the Tour de l'Avenir this year.
Yeah, definitely. We just mentioned Mathieu Riccitello, who's named by some as the favourite. Well, now that Jonas Stanemüters has left the race, not to dwell on him too long, but yeah, Mathieu Riccitello is one of the riders, the sole finisher of a Grand Tour already in this race. So he hasn't really had any big wins this year, but he's been racing at World Tour level. So that obviously it makes it a little bit hard to see exactly what his level is at compared to these younger riders. But yeah, he's one to look for. I think Hannes Wilksch is maybe the second biggest favorite right now with Stanemüters out. It's a German rider, rides for the Tudor under-23 team, and had a couple really good results this year with a 3rd place in the Giro Next Gen already. And then after that we've got a whole host of riders, but you've got the likes of Archie Ryan, who finished close to the podium last year in Tour de l'Avenir, but he's been suffering from a knee injury for most of this year. Actually, this is only his 2nd race back, so we don't really know what his form is at. Then looking through the list, I think we've got a lot of names like the now freed up Johannes Gulset, who was a teammate of Stanemüters, but he'll be going for his own chance. He's very young though, so don't really know where if he's going to be up to the task of finishing off this race. For the Brits, we maybe have Lucas Nerurkar. It's one of those riders coming up again. But yeah, there's lots more names to look for in that overall. We probably shouldn't go through them all because we'd be here for another half an hour.
Yeah, I think that's the fascinating thing about the Tour de l'Avenir. There will be some surprises. There will be some riders that we know who are already proven. Many who will be moving up to the next level next year. And an interesting rider for me is the Italian number 131, Francesco Bussato, winner of the under-23 Liège-Bastogne-Liège this year, and a couple of other wins as well. He's moving across to Intermarché next year. He's already guested. He's already had some pretty decent results in 1.1 races. He's a very good climber. I'm just wondering what he can do in this race. I think he's another one to potentially watch out for the overall. I could be wrong, but certainly a rider that's performed on hillier terrain at the higher level already this year, and his services were secured. I believe he signed or had already had a pre-contract back in April, or back when he won at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He won that from a group sprint, so he's not only a good climber, he can also finish things off from a small group as well, so watch out for Bussato.
Yeah, he's one for the climbs, but we did see in the Giro the Next Gen that he maybe suffers a little bit on the really long climbs. You don't get those very often in this younger category of racing, but he's certainly someone to look for in those hilly stages, and we'll see how long he can hold on the actual climbs, because they're really, really long climbs for such young riders. The Italian team does have a few riders who can climb really well. Piganzoli was already up there last year in Tour de l'Avenir, and Pellizzari and Pinarello are also riders to look for. and we'll see how far Bussato gets on those climbs.
Yeah, as you say, they've got a versatile squad up there. Runner-up on the stage yesterday was Villa, teammate of our stage winners. The gap stabilises again as we continue to gently wend our way through these beautiful country lanes here in France, in the region of Loire-Atlantique. That's where we started today, in Nozay. Gentle ripples, the longest stage of the race today at 195 kilometres. Team time trial tomorrow on the menu, so a lot of, I think today is going to be an important one for as many of the big GC riders you would imagine, save for Foldega, who's out in front, to try and keep the legs as fresh as possible, because we could see some big time gaps. Although, just reading through the regulations, Jens, I don't know if you've had a deep dive into the regulations. I did that the other day, just looking through the regulations for the team time trial. I don't think a rider, as long as they finish within a certain percentage of the team, can actually lose more than 2 minutes. There are actually time gap caps, and it's the fourth rider to cross the line that counts in the team time trial tomorrow. Teams here are maxed out at 6. There are 1 or 2 teams that just have 5 riders, but teams of 6. But tomorrow it's the fourth rider that counts. But yeah, there's a cap of 2 minutes unless you lose a disproportionately larger amount of time. So it's quite an interesting rule for the team time trial.
Yeah, just it's quite a confusing rule, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they did have it last year as well, and it is the case that you can't lose more than 2 minutes if you finish with the fourth rider of the team. So it's just the team that comes across the line same time. You can't lose more than 4 minutes. If you lose 1 second more than the fourth rider, that's your actual time. So if a team finishes, for instance, on 6 minutes, everyone who finishes with the actual team that crosses the line, so the fourth rider, if there's 4 riders who cross the line on 6 minutes, they lose 2 minutes. And if there's a rider who just loses the wheel in the final 200 meters, finishes 4 seconds behind, so that's 6 minutes and 4 seconds in the GC. So it's a really confusing rule. It's kind of weird that such a small time gap can mean so much, but that's something to keep an eye on for those teams who are projected to lose a lot of time.
Yeah, they did have it, you know. We are talking maybe 15 or 20 years ago in the Tour de France, and it was for one team time trial only, and then the rule was changed. It basically, whatever time you did, the fastest team got like a 10 or 15 second time bonus on the second team. So whatever regardless of the differential, there was a set tariff of time gaps for the order of teams that won. So if you were 20th team and last team, you could only lose 2 minutes, and that's what you. So regardless of your time, the time gaps were set if you were first, second, third, fourth or fifth. So very strange. And the thinking behind it was so the team time trial didn't affect the overall classification and the chances of climbers or GC riders in teams that weren't particularly strong, which really defeats the whole object. It then suggests that this is just a spectacle, doesn't it, rather than anything else. But I'm still a big fan of the team time trial, and I do understand that rule a little bit, and I think it's so a lot of riders who might lose maybe 4 or 5 minutes aren't out of the game, so we keep the GC a little bit tighter while still having the spectacle of a team time trial. That's my thinking behind that.
Yeah, definitely, and I think for the race it's a good thing. It might be a better thing to not have such a long team time trial to limit the gaps, but yeah, it's difficult for those smaller nations, but I think it's probably a good thing for the overall. We'll see a couple good climbers who would otherwise lose a lot of time, who might not lose as much time now with this rule instated. But we do have to watch out, because last year there were a couple of riders who didn't even finish within the time limit because of that rule that you can actually lose that time if you drop from your team. So we'll have to watch out for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. As I say, we will watch the team time trial tomorrow. It's going to be a spectacle, that is for sure. It always is. But with these smaller teams and with that rule, riders are going to be minded to try and stay together for as long as they can, as we get the first proper glimpse of our neutral service. Michelin are on board this year. The well-known tyre brand, of course. Well over 100 years of age now, but good to see them in the mix here with this race. And also, with 51.5 Ks to go, it's worth giving a an important shout out to the first ever Tour de l'Avenir for under 23 women, which is taking place following this Tour de l'Avenir. So this finishes on Sunday the 27th of August, and the inaugural edition of the Tour de l'Avenir Femmes for the under 23 women starts on the 28th, and that runs through to the 1st of September. Slightly shorter, but again, just another step in the right direction, and the further development of our wonderful sport. Now that the depth in talent, the pool that we have across the board is getting deeper and deeper, as was illustrated just by the quality of the racing we're getting across the board now. But good to see the young women represented with their own Tour de l'Avenir. So 51 k's to go, gap down to 1 minute 30 seconds. The duo in front, Jens, still looking pretty strong, but this is going to start to hurt now, and you wonder how deep Foldager in particular is going to want to go now, don't you?
Yeah, we see the gap coming down as well, so we'll have to see mainly how the peloton control is, because we did see sort of 4 or 5 riders working together in the peloton, and they should not have such a hard time controlling this, I would say. It's just a question of when they're going to bring it back. 1 minute 30 now. I think they're right on schedule for taking them back sort of too early, but that's the game that the breakaway is probably willing to play. If they slow down, maybe the peloton will catch them, but if they ride as hard as they can right now, they don't have a chance anyway. So it's a game they're going to play, and I think for now the peloton is probably winning, but it can turn around any second if the breakaway has held something back. So we'll have to see that at the end.
Yeah, it's, as you say, the control is definitely in the hands of the peloton, but the peloton are only riding at the speed they need to bring this back. So you could argue that these could actually back off a little bit to save a little bit of energy, and as a result, as a reaction, and with the bunch not wanting to catch them too early, the bunch might actually knock it off a little bit. But I think because of the lack of communication that's available to the riders, that process takes just a little bit longer as well, doesn't it? It's quite immediate, isn't it, with the elites, with the pros who are wired up. As we get another look at the peloton behind, that process here is going to be a lot slower, because you can't just keep having riders dropping back and having face-to-face conversations with the DS. It's all done, most of it, the vast majority of the decision making at the sharp end of this race will be between these young road captains, won't it? Making that call based on the decisions, having conversations, and that's what does make this quite fascinating. And the more you look at it, the more you might think that this is why they've sent Foldager up the road, just to cause that little bit of confusion and to see how they do manage this gap, while the Danes can just sit back and relax. It is a really interesting one.
Yeah, I think the ideal scenario is without those radios, that the breakaway has a little bit more power over what the peloton will do. They if they just knock it back like they do seem to be doing now, with Foldager taking feedback, the gap will drop a little, the peloton will see it, the peloton might think, well, we might slow down because we'll catch them too early, and that'll open us up for more attacks. And if they time it just right, the breakaway can then accelerate and try to gain even more advantage before the peloton catches up. That's probably their only chance. It's been done before, but it's a very difficult process to get right. I think Foldager is probably one of the only riders who's got the experience to actually get it right, but with just 2 riders, it's going to be difficult.
It certainly is. As we roll through the feed zone, tick under 49 kilometres to go now, 48.9 to be exact. A beautiful summer's day here, but there's a lot of learning going on in the front as well. Remember, Foldager 22, moving to the World Tour next year with the Jayco Alula, and young Alyaz Turk, 18 years of age, and he rides for the Adria Mobile UCI team, a team that's seen some big stars come through, including Primoz Roglic. That's a team that ever since I've been commentating has been around. The best part of 15, maybe even longer, 15 years, that team has been around, with a conveyor belt of Slovenian talent coming through. But his best result this year was in a national event in July, the Klitsch, excuse my pronunciation there, I must apologise, where he was 5th. But this really is a proper baptism for this young rider in front, who'll be learning a lot. And Foldager's role here, of course, he clearly wants to stay away for as long as he can. And one would imagine, given the experience of these two riders, that Foldega is going to be quite a bit stronger than the younger rider who's now on the front, but still they can really work together well. And this is where Foldega needs to use that experience, isn't he, and encourage the younger rider with him, and they can work together despite there maybe being a bit of a difference in terms of strength.
Yeah, I think on paper Foldega is definitely the stronger rider, also the more experienced rider. I'd say, you know, there might be like a 5% chance this break makes it to the finish, and even in those 5%, like probably 4.5% of the time, it's going to be Foldega who wins, and yeah, that makes it difficult. But I think both of those riders should still want to try to stay away, and Foldega is probably the rider that's going to be responsible for making the decisions. I think it would be logical for Turk to just rely on his companion here and you know, follow the judgment that the more experienced breakaway rider has, because he's shown that he can do it yesterday. So I assume that's the most logical tactic, and it does look like they're not racing as hard as they can at the moment. So I think there is some kind of plan going on there.
Yep, this is something that we're seeing more and more of, is this real intelligence of how to pace a breakaway, how to use the resource to its fullest, to really unlock the potential of the resource that you have, factoring in what's happening behind, factoring in the wing direction, factoring in any climbs, and factoring in as well deeper into a stage race, because this generally happens more in stage races, factoring in the political dynamics of the general classification and how that can impact. So there's so many different impact factors, and we're now heading into the last approximately hour of racing, 47.2 k's to go, so probably just over an hour, I would imagine, maybe an hour and 5, hour and 6 minutes until we hit the finish line. But coming into the final phase of racing, and we saw them ease up and take a feed. The bunch behind eased up through that feed, and they're feathering the power here, and they've just bought themselves another 20 or 30 seconds, which means they are going to stay out in front for probably at least another 20 or 30 k's, and the catch might not be made, Jens, until pretty deep into this one.
I think that is the game that the peloton also has to play, because in that peloton, you know, this is under 23 racing. You know that the second that breakaway is caught, someone else is going to try to attack, and those sprint teams that are controlling the pace at the front, they definitely don't want that. So it's best for them to catch that group within the final 10 kilometers. But on the other hand, that does give the breakaway an opportunity to use that slacking off the pace in the peloton to their advantage. That's the idea, but we'll have to see whether it works. At the moment it looks like 1:30 again, so gap coming down again.
Yeah, the bunch reacting to that gap increasing by 20 seconds or so. I think there is going to be a little bit of maybe slight inaccuracy with the times we're getting, so factor in a plus or minus of a few percent. We saw that a little bit yesterday. Great to have this race on our screens, but in terms of resource at the disposal of the production, a little bit more limited as well. We have to factor that in. We're getting some great images here as they whiz along through these beautiful sunflower fields just over on the right hand side. So special if you ride in France this time of year, and this relatively remote, very sparsely populated part of France is absolutely beautiful. Good catch there for the Musette, for our young Slovenian. And the gap holding steady up 1 minute and 30 seconds. But these kilometres now are ticking by really nicely. But they're certainly not on the ragged edge here. They are definitely holding something back for maybe one big push towards the end. But still, the pendulum firmly in favour of the peloton behind. As another team moves through to the front. They're backlit at the moment, so I can't quite tell what team that is. Another 5 seconds taken off at 1 minute and 25 seconds. So today, Jens, this is a real slow burn. But okay, let's assume, because you just never know what's going to happen in this race. I think that's fair. We know that there's more of a chance that the peloton will catch this group, but in terms of sprint talent that we've got here, we've already talked about one or two riders. Luke Lamperty, I touched on the ability of Max Walker, but what other riders do you think could figure in the finale if we were to get a bunch sprint?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I haven't even marked them down as sprinters, just for riders for stage wins, because there aren't any really clear sprinters. I think we can look at the teams controlling the peloton. We saw Germany up there with Tim Thorn Teutenberg is their rider of choice for a sprint. Canada's got Riley Pickrell. Then we moved to the USA, who had a rider at the front. Obviously, Luke Lamperty, who's moving to Soudal Quickstep next year, going up to the professionals. The Israel team is the more interesting one, because they did have the winner of the bunch sprint yesterday, Rotem Tene, but usually their fastest sprinter should be Oded Kogut, who's won a couple races recently, who's been up there in some professional races like a Tour of Belgium. He's probably the second fastest rider, I would say, on paper, behind Luke Lamperty.
Okay.
But yeah, it's still all very difficult to tell. Some other riders who were up there yesterday in that sprint from the peloton, Stian Fredheim was the second rider over the line from the peloton. Vlad van Mechelen, the young Belgian, he's just a first-year rider, but rides for the DSM development team. And Francesco Bussato might be good up hills, is also pretty fast. So those are sort of the names to look for. 11th place yesterday was Robert Donaldson, the British rider, and that's one more of those riders that could do well in a sprint.
A couple of names to watch out for. But first order of the day is to catch these two, and they've got it down now to 1 minute and 20 seconds, but I don't think it's a full-on pursuit yet. I do not think that they actually want to open this race up again, because if it does open up, for the reasons that you've just talked about, the fact that these riders at this age aren't fully formed yet. There are clearly some riders who can win bunch kicks. There's some pure climbers, but at this relatively young age, although we're getting ideas about the sorts of riders that they might become, it's certainly not set in stone just yet. And also there'll be a lot of riders with individual aspirations too, as the bunch just knock it off a little bit, heading through Le Coudray Macouar.
Yeah, it looks like the pace has dropped, but it does look a little bit more nervous now. So more teams moving up to the front, trying to, we're sort of seeing that color blocking start to form as well, with teams getting multiple riders in at the front, trying to control the peloton, and that sort of messes up the chase as well. But yeah, it's riders with individual ambitions. I think we used to, well, usually there are riders who are a certain type of rider in the juniors and the under-23s, and then they turn pro, and it turns out they're slightly different riders. It's just a sprinter in the U23s is not necessarily the best sprinter in the elites, because the races go so fast in the World Tour. If you're sprinting in the Tour de France, you have to push out so many watts before the sprint even starts that a slightly different rider rises to the top, maybe less pure sprint power and slightly more that 4-minute effort is slightly more important in the elites. So that tends to happen, that maybe the fastest sprinters sometimes just don't make it at World Tour level.
It is fascinating. It really, really is. Looking forward to ultimately calling the finish, whether it is two riders that go clear, whether it comes back together early and we see the race open up again. And I think the sprint teams in particular, when I say the sprint teams, the teams with proven sprint talent at the under-23 level. United States, they were on the front yesterday. They've put a rider on the front today, as you just rightly pointed out, Jens. Luke Lamperty is one of the fastest young riders on the planet at the moment, as well as being the double United States national crit champion at elite level 2. He has to be one of the favourites. Then definitely watch out for the Brits, Max Walker, Donaldson as well. They've got a really versatile team, including Joseph Blackmore, fresh off the back of riding the Worlds, but at the mountain biking. So Blackmore has been recruited across from the mountain biking. Very talented road rider too, but they are an exceptionally well-drilled team. So I think there's going to be a difference here, Jens, isn't it? There's going to be teams that are far more tactically switched on. They ride as a unit collectively more often than maybe some of the other teams. So I think, yeah, maybe Israel will be similar, but Belgium, maybe in Canada, and then the rest of the teams, I think we'll see a little bit less colour blocking and just riders trying to surf the wheels and adding that little bit of unpredictability to the finish. But I do think there'll be 3 or 4 teams that are quite well dialed, and then the rest will be following on their coattails. Could see a few surprises, but there's definitely 1 or 2 names to watch out for, and they're used to being dropped off by their teammates in situations like this?
Yeah, it's generally more the traditional cycling nations who've got a big backlog of U23 riders to choose from that have sort of a wider array of talent to choose from, and that tends to work better together. They ride together obviously throughout the year in these Nations Cup races, but then there's other teams that might work well together, but maybe they just don't have the depth of talent. There's a couple of those nations going around as well, and if you're a sprinter in that kind of team, then it's going to be very difficult. You just have to maybe be dropped off by one more rider and try to latch onto a different team. But we're seeing some different nations come to the front. Luxembourg does seem to be there with a few different riders. Canada and I think Germany now at the front of the peloton.
Yep, Canada, Germany both had pretty decent days yesterday. And Riley Pickrell, I think, will be the representative. He'll be placed at the head of affairs, or ideally, for the Canadian squad. The gap now at its lowest point since we've come on here to our two riders out in front. Incredibly, the race leader, Anders Foldager, is one of the two riders out in front. He is joined by Aljaz Turk, 18 years of age, from Slovenia. It's been a big adventure for that young man. It's been a strange adventure, I think, for the man in the yellow jersey. Still scratching my head to a degree, but what it has provided us with is some real entertainment and trying to fathom out tactics. I find one of the most enjoyable parts of this job is to try and look at situations, work out what the rationale is, where the thinking comes from, especially in this modern era where more and more of the tactics aren't based on any traditional thinking. It's about disruption, and this could be something like that, because ordinarily, let's be frank, Jens, if this was a pro race, the rider out in front in the yellow jersey, unless it was on a mountain stage and he was away through pure strength and moving away, you really would be criticising it. But here it is slightly different, because let's be honest, the under-23s, it is different, isn't it? It has its own fluid identity.
Yeah, don't forget that we did see Wout van Aert do a pretty similar move in the Tour de France last year, so it does happen in the pro ranks. It just doesn't happen very often. Maybe it does happen slightly more often here, but yeah, I still think the most logical explanation is that he was attacking, trying to get into a bigger group, and just a couple of riders latched onto him, and he just decided to go with it and try his best, even though it may not be the absolute best tactic.
55 seconds now, 3¼ hours of tick by, and you can just see Turk rolling through. You could see Foldager was actually, he seems to still have quite a lot under the hood. You know, when you just saw the young Turk just run alongside him, and Foldager and couldn't actually make any inroads into actually going past him, so Foldager had to, you could visibly see him ease off the gas, and that just shows, I think, the discrepancy, not the discrepancy, just the differential between what's left in the tank of both of those riders, and that age gap between them too, the best part of 3.5 years, as the gap comes down on this wide open bit of road now to 40 seconds. And even on the wheel here, Turk's starting to struggle a bit. Great close-up shot of him on that Basso bike of his. And there's the figure of the man in front. The maillot jaune, a flick of the elbow, but I don't think Turk can come through. He might have to do a slightly longer turn than that. I think Turk now, unsurprisingly, Jens, is properly starting to suffer. And I think this is where Foldager now is just turning up the pace a little bit as we head into the final phase of racing.
Yeah, we have to imagine this is a rider who's moving up to World Tour next year, and he's definitely deserved that contract through a couple of big wins and other big results. And the other rider is just a rider who's just come up from the under-19s, and like last year at this time of year, he was racing races that were maybe 100, 120 kilometers. This is a stage of 195 kilometers, and that's a pretty big step up. I think this might even be the longest stage of some of these riders' careers, and if you're that young, that's just sort of you've never been there in a race of 190 kilometers, and then to be in the breakaway, that's a pretty serious step up.
It is, and that's something. Oh, there we go. Foldager has decided to attack his young counterpart, and here's the response. Fair play to Turk here to try and get back into the slipstream. The elastic has snapped at the moment. This is going to take one super hard effort to get back in contact. And did you know what? He might make it. It's on a slightly lower gear. Looks like he's on around a sprocket lower, using that leg speed to try and get back in contact with the Flying Dane, and the head goes there. The elastic has finally snapped. That's how brutal this sport is. And now Foldager, the Maillot Jaune, goes clear on his own. 40 seconds is his gap to the peloton. Well, that was brutal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a brutal move, but it's understandable. I think Foldager is now committed. He's going to try to increase that gap and try to win the stage that way. But with just 40 seconds, it's going to be very difficult. There's still quite a long way to go. We've lost our kilometer ticker again, but it does look like we're almost entering this next climb that's coming up, which would put us somewhere around sort of 38 kilometers to go, I would imagine. Yep. But it's difficult to estimate. Just 40 seconds, it's going to be difficult.
It certainly is, and you can just see the teams spread all across the road. This is just positioning play, no real arrowhead formation here, and that's partly due as well to the fact that we do have a nagging headwind. We've had it for the vast majority of the day. It's a beautiful day here, moving through two regions. Loire-Atlantique is where we start, and we're in the Indre-et-Loire region at the back end of the stage, finishing in the beautiful town, the historic town of Chinon. Castle in Chinon, the Chateau de Chinon, was actually built back in the 1100s, and that was a explosive move there. One definitive attack. There was no real, well, there was a response actually. It was a brave response by the young Alias Turk of the Slovenian team, but it won't be too much longer after that big max effort to try and get back into the slipstream of the Dane. He'll be back in the peloton, but up this little climb here, this uncategorized drag, the gap now with 36 k's. So you're nearly spot on there, Jens, actually. A good bit of estimating on your part there. 36.1 k's to go, and Turk about to be taken back by the peloton. And with one rider out in front on its own, they do look to be very much in control. And even the likes of a rider like Foldager, this is going to be one tall order. And it does look as if it's the Danes, actually, who are on the front, ever so slightly blocking a little bit.
Yeah, maybe it is going to be difficult for Foldager to hold on to this, but we will see. If he's got anything left, then he should slightly increase that gap now, and I'm not really seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, they've got this well in control, but you never underestimate a man of his talent. 4 big wins this season, and here he is in full flight. When was the last time you saw anything like this? Well, I think it was back to your point a couple of years ago in the Tour de France in Calais, when Wout van Aert clipped off with about 10 k's to go and took an almighty victory. It really was something pretty special. And this young man has gone with a lot longer to go than that, though. He's still got 35.5 kilometers to go. Apologies for the slight picture breakup. We are using 4G technology for the transmission of the Tour de l'Avenir this year. And there's our first glimpse of the finishing line. As you can see, the final finishing straight, it only comes in sight with about 250, 300 meters to go. There is, like, as we pass under the Flamme Rouge, it's basically a straight line from kilometers 3 to 2, then 2 to 1. And then with about 750 meters to go, the road bears to the left, then gently swings round to the right, then straightens out again. Not quite a chicane, more of a gently meandering left and then a right-hander, and there is your finishing straight. It's pretty flat, doesn't kick up at all to the line. It's a flat finish, and as you can see by looking at the foliage and the trees there, not too much wind at all. But out in front, any bit of wind for this man in front, even just a wind of a couple of k's an hour, is really going to start to hurt, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately for him, the weather conditions are not in his favour. Anders Foldager, he's chosen to go out here and try his best in a breakaway again. The peloton is only at 30 seconds with 34 kilometers to go. But it will be interesting to see if the peloton decides to actually catch him. What happens then? Because if that group is caught, if Foldager is caught back into the group, it might open up these sprint teams to other attacks by different riders. And I would assume, you know, in a World Tour race, in the Tour de France, it might not happen, but this is an under-23 race, and I do sort of expect, if Foldager is caught within the next 10 kilometers, I do expect someone else to try to give it a go and try to surprise the sprint teams.
I do. There we go. We've got some attack starting here. It looks like it is one of the Danish riders trying to get across the gap there. So a big attack on this long drag, and the elastic snaps straight away. So the race, although we've still got one rider out in front, I think it looks like it's one of the riders from the Netherlands on the wheel. And there he is. Foldager is indeed caught. Well, that came very quickly. If he wants to hold on to this yellow jersey, of course, he's got to stay in the bunch. And it is one of his teammates. So the Danes are really taking this race by the scruff of the neck, going straight over the top. They clearly don't want this to be a bunch sprint today.
No, I think Denmark has had some sort of plan lined up for this race, and they're trying it again. Foldager didn't look too great anymore, and they've put another man up there to try and attack. Just 2 riders for the moment, and we've lost the pictures again, so that's a bit unfortunate. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably last year's stage winner, Adam Holm Jorgensen, who was on the attack. It's sort of his posture, but we'll have to wait to confirm that. And it was one of the Jumbo-Visma riders on the Dutch team who was trying to follow him.
Now here is the moment that Foldager was caught. The Maillot Jaune, after the best part of 130 Ks out in front, give or take, took around 15 Ks for the break to finally go after a very rapid start into that nagging headwind. He is now caught. These are pictures at the finish line in Chinon. The finish actually very close to the river. The absolutely gorgeous River Vienne, which passes through this city, and we do have 2 riders out in front now. Yeah, definitely one of the riders from the Netherlands, and definitely a Dane. And there is the bunch behind, but it's not the bunch. This is what we thought. This sort of terrain as well, although it's not overly hilly, it's twisting, it's turning. There's only maybe 4 or 5 teams that can really control this race, and the race has essentially opened up again and exploded. And this might come back together, but the race is fully on here. It's fascinatingly chaotic racing. I absolutely love it, Jens.
Yeah, 2 leaders and that chasing group that's got itself loose from the peloton. That's an interesting one, because if those riders actually cooperate, then there's a decent chance that they might stay away. It might be difficult, but if enough teams are in there, and if they all cooperate, then the sprinters teams will have a very hard time trying to catch that again. We can't see who's in those moves, especially behind. But I imagine if the group gets any kind of gap, we'll see it soon enough.
Oh, this is a good little move. So Denmark and the Netherlands as they approach our motorbike. Hopefully we can just pick off the numbers for you. There's that little counter. It is in the Jorgensen and Van Bell, who are clear. Straight off the back.
2 very strong riders last year's stage winner, Adam Holm Jorgensen, and Lou Van Belle was really close last year as well on one of the hill stages. He finished 2nd just behind Romain Grégoire. So this is a strong move. This is not something to take lightly, but with only 2 riders, it's going to be difficult if those sprinters teams get things organized again. But for the moment, that second group is definitely still off the front, and it's become chaotic again. Even though it was a projected sprint stage, it's full of chaos once again with just 30 kilometers to go.
Yeah, they've opened up a nice little gap here. There's that group behind, which are closing, but slowly. And then yet to come round that corner is the peloton. There's another couple of riders, or 1 rider, trying to get across to that little counter-attack. But this is a good move. And the Dutchman, Lou Van Belle, is 21 years of age. Rides for the Jumbo-Visma development team. Just finished inside the top 20 in the World Road Championships in Glasgow the other day. 19th, in fact, so a solid performance there for him. And is relaying well with the man from Denmark as well. So they're opening up a nice little gap, and on these twisty lanes, this is absolutely ideal as well. It is a commentator's cliche, but it does hold a lot of water. They're out of sight, not exactly out of mind, but when you can't see the riders out in front, it just adds another dimension to the difficulty in chasing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does, especially if there's so many teams up the road. If that group gets away, then it's going to be incredibly difficult to control on these kinds of roads. The riders obviously know radios. It's up to a couple of riders to identify who's just gone up the road. So not everyone will be aware of exactly who is in that move, and just like we are not aware of who's in there. that's going to add another dimension and just the control. There will be a couple sprint teams who are going to go all in for the sprint, but I think there's so many teams and riders looking for opportunities to take a stage win. They're pretty limited in just an 8-stage race, so they're trying to catch this opportunity, and Jurgensen and Van Belle are doing a good job of it. And that second group, we'll have to see where they are at exactly, but they are pretty close to this group now, so I sort of expect that group to come back to the two leaders, and then we'll see how it's going to turn out, and we might see who's in there to make an estimate of what's going to happen later.
Exactly. If there's a couple of riders, if there's one from Great Britain, for example, one from the US, maybe one from Germany, Canada, the teams that we know have been riding before. The Moto's just behind that group, still no sign of the bunch, and that suggests that there might be some of the big strong teams in this race. First glimpse of our two riders out in front. Adam Hold Jorgensen, 20 years of age. Although he's riding for his country in this race, of course, he's actually in the middle of a stagiaire with Team Ajeko Alula, so this is an important race for him. He joined that squad on the 1st of the 8th for the stagiaire period. There is the peloton just behind. The group closing incrementally, and they've got 20 seconds. This front group to the peloton 20 seconds, and the group in between probably only 5 or 6 seconds, and it looks like it's a group of about 8 or 10 riders of considerable size.
Yeah, it's definitely something like that. Still not sure who's in there, but the group is moving. It does seem to be cooperating at the moment, and that will give us a very interesting final.
It certainly will. Well, Adam Holm Jorgensen, aside from riding for Ajeko Alula as a stagiaire, applies his trade for the BHS Pil Beton Bornholm Continental team. Won a stage of the Tour de l'Avenir last year, as you were saying. That was a superb win. That was stage 3 that finished in La Truie. It was a classy bike ride here. You don't get a stagiaire with a World Tour team without being classy, and this is a great shot of these riders relaying together, super composed on a bike. Both of these riders here, and they are moving very, very quickly indeed. This is a proper little fighting force. Great attack as well on that little climb. Clearly part of the plan to be on the front foot today, not give any chance to the sprinters teams, who have now got to reconfigure. And as Jens was just saying, as soon as we know the composition of the group just behind, I think that will give us an indication of any chances of success of these two groups out in front now. 27.4 k's to go, so around about 35 minutes of racing still on the menu as we head ever nearer Chinon in the height of summer here. This is the group that's just about to get on here, Jens.
Yeah, it does look like one of the Luxembourg riders leading that group back to the front group, but the terrain is going to be flatter from now on, so that will add another dimension, slightly easier to control. Looking at some of the numbers, just going to try to see as many of those as possible. It looks like there's another Dutch rider in here with the Dutch champion Pepijn Reinderink, another strong rider for the Netherlands, and that gives us a is it 10-man group? I think
it does look like it. There's definitely two riders from Great Britain in there as well. It looked like one of them, I'm going to have to have a close look at the numbers, one looked like to be Max Walker, 9th in the recent under-23 World Road Race Championships. This is a very, very good move. If we can get a bit of a closer look, we'll soon pick out those numbers. Is that Jack Rootkin Gray? I think it looked like 96 there, 4th place in the World Championships, rides for the St. Piran team. Yeah, so a very good little move that's now moving away, still with a 20-second advantage over the peloton. Nobody from the United States of America in there, and remember they have one of the preeminent sprinters in the field, Luc Lamperty, so that's one team that I think will be chasing. Belgium are represented, Germany also represented, so some of the big teams all looks like the bunch is back on again. That was pretty quick. They latched on to that very quickly indeed. So there was one furious chase to bring that back together, so whoever did that, fair play, because they were shifting.
Yeah, it looked a little bit like an Israeli rider who closed that final bit of a gap, but that very, very dangerous group caught now, and now again it's an opportunity for more attacks. Once the riders at the front realize that they're called, they'll probably drop the pace a little bit, and then we'll see if there's someone else who's going to try their luck.
There's a little bit of a move on the left-hand side, harder to go clear when there's a little bit of a headwind as well. So much easier just sat in the wheel behind. But it's Belgium now moving through in that blue kit, just trying to up the pace. And they do have one of the riders that can sprint particularly well. That's Vlad van Mechelen, number 6. But another little move, looks like it's just starting to go here. There's a flat form to the front of the peloton as another little group goes clear. It looks to me, Jens, this is going to be the theme on the run into the line here. There are so many other teams who aren't satisfied with this coming down to a bunch sprint and happy to constantly go on the offensive.
Yeah, I'm going to say good luck to the sprint teams in controlling this, because it's going to be difficult. Now there's a 6-rider move and then a couple of riders coming across again. Of course, you don't want to miss this move, because it could be the right one. Any of these moves could be the right one at this point. It looks sort of like the early breakaway formation all over again, but there's only a couple kilometers to go, so it's crucial to be in this move now if you want to win the stage. I think it does sort of look like an Irish rider with the Jumbo Visma helmet, which could be Archie Ryan, the climber, and this is already turning into a GC battle again.
Yep, thrilling racing, as we saw yesterday, and I think I can be quite happy to say that it was an unorthodox breakaway today, containing the yellow jersey, Anders Foldager. He had with him for company earlier on the son of Alexander Vinokourov of Kazakhstan, and also in the mix was Aljaz Turk of Slovenia, the youngest rider in that break. After taking the King of the Mountains, Vinokourov slipped back to the peloton, leaving 2 riders out in front. And with about 35 k's to go, Anders Foldager decided to go it alone, attacked Turk of Slovenia. Got a lead of only around 30 seconds, and then he was caught by the peloton, and actually another attack went straight over the top. And essentially what we've had is a hard reset, and the race is now open. It is fast as we thunder towards the finish line in Chinon today. We've already had a view of the finish. There's that little gentle meandering chicane with about 350 meters to go to bear in mind. So the finish line only comes into view with about 250 meters to go. And they will, for the last 4 k's or so, pick up a gentle tailwind. So it will be a very fast run into the line. Although saying that, the wind we have had today isn't super strong, between 6 and 10 kilometers an hour. But boy, the pace has picked up. Denmark again on the front here, constantly testing what's going on here as we just cross over the river. All together now 23.8 k's to go. I tell you what, your guess is as good as mine here, Jens. Bunch sprint or a breakaway, difficult to tell here, isn't it? But one thing's for sure, this is entertaining.
Yeah, it's good to know. This is now crossing the river. That means the terrain is flat from now on. There's very little elevation from now on. We did see some of those small rises, but it is constant attacking. It's just up to those couple teams to try to control this from now on. It does look like it's either a Norwegian or a Danish rider now off the front. Pretty similar jerseys. But yeah, it's constant attacks. Some of the teams definitely not happy to have this come down to a mass sprint.
No, certainly not. Yeah, Norway, I think that was. Several of the Norway riders, or the Norwegian riders, shall I say, have the Uno X helmets on. They're relatively easy to identify, but from a distance, especially backlit as they are now, apologies for not regularly identifying these riders. Another move, that looks definitely Denmark there. You can just tell by the white band across the chest. Belgium also in the mix there as well. Great Britain never too far away, as there's another attack. Certainly Denmark are on a mission today, that is for sure. Another small fissure appears as a group. Another group continues to go. Once you get the right combination of riders that goes, most of the big countries represented, that goes clear. And then there's that little bit of a hesitation as riders immediately shut the gap. There's a rhythm to this, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. It does look like Denmark is the nation driving the pace and constantly attacking. Once the previous Danish rider gets caught, the next one goes, and now we've got 3 riders off the front, but yeah, still no control. No one really knows what's going to happen here, so everyone wants to be in these moves. Every team that's not represented in a small move wants to close it down, and that's the pattern, and it's going to be that pattern until either we hit the last couple kilometers and people start preparing for a sprint, or until one of these breaks actually gets a good gap and probably rides off to the stage win.
Yeah, there's not quite the ability to launch, as you say. It's completely flat now. There's been several little undulations, one categorized climb earlier today, taken by Vinokourov, as I mentioned. But that small gap's been brought back together. The Israel team as well, in that white kit with the blue angular lines across the front, active in trying to keep things together as best they can. They have two very fast riders, Oded Kugut and Rotem Tene. Tene himself won the bunch kit yesterday, but as Jens was saying, probably their protected sprinter and a proven fast man is Kugut, hence their desire as best they can to keep things back together. It looks like this is Australia now in the mix, just trying to pull somebody clear. Always have a strong lineup, Australia, but Canada now in the mix as well, so take your pick here.
There's very few nations who aren't trying to get up the road. I think Canada seems to be controlling, and definitely Israel is the main team that seems to be intent on making this a bunch sprint. We saw Colby Simmons in one of those moves for the US, so maybe not trusting Lamperti fully in this kind of situation, and it's again one of the Danish riders going up the road, attacking away, and now it's just one rider, so we'll see if this sticks, but I expect someone else to try to jump across again.
I wonder how Foldager is feeling at the moment. Remember, he has the lead on the general classification. No time bonuses out on the course, no 10, 6 and 4 time bonuses at the finish either, so we could see a change around in the general classification. But right now, Foldager back in the fold. Hopefully for him, he's managing to recover, but one of his teammates is now up the road. That was a very sharp acceleration that's taken this rider clear. Wonderful poise on the bike, looks completely at one with his machine here, doesn't he? You can just tell this lad looks super efficient.
Yeah, it's a very aerodynamic position. He had a good acceleration, and that gap is going out pretty quickly, so it looks like the peloton is slowed down a little bit, and that means either this is Joshua Goodnitz, it says on the screen, sort of the faster rider in that Danish team, but they're apparently not trusting the sprint, trying to make it an attack, and with just 20 kilometers to go, a solo move, it's sort of a manageable distance, isn't it? It's an effort of maybe up to half an hour, probably slightly less. That looks like an effort that is manageable. It's not a huge long effort like Foldager was trying with that small group. So I'm curious to see how far this can take him.
Yeah, this is a good move. Goodnitz is clear. Opened up a nice little gap here. As you said, carried that momentum through, got super aero. Optimum, and has opened up a lead of 15 seconds as he whizzes past our motorbike. And there is just daylight, dappled daylight on the road surface as we spin around, briefly causing a slight bit of nausea for the commentary team here as we look again at our finish line in Chinon. So Josh Amos Goodnitz is out in front, 15 seconds or so on the peloton behind, and here he is in full flight on these smaller country roads here. Flat, but ever so gently meandering left and right, giving him an opportunity briefly to be out of sight of the peloton behind. Ideal terrain for attacking racing, and much more this can provide a far better catalyst for racing than those big wide open roads. It just inspires attacking through these narrow streets, and certainly the place to be in these little pinch points here, Jens, is out in front.
Yeah, either out in front or right at the front of the peloton, but that's pretty difficult to achieve the positioning. Goodnitz is not in a terrible place at the moment, especially on these sections. There will be some wider roads coming up pretty soon, where he will suffer if a peloton has some control behind. But we'll have to remain to be seen how much control there will be in the peloton. Because maybe some more riders will try to attack, or it could just come down to a sprint if the sprinters team managed to get this under control. But that has proven pretty difficult today.
Well, this lad's had already had several wins, most of them at national level, over in Denmark. He won the Eschborn Frankfurt under-23 World Cup race in a big bunch sprint. So as you said, he is one of the faster sprinters for the Danish team. But clearly their plan today had a man in the move earlier on, Foldager, the Maillot Jaune no less, out in front. They attacked again in this second little group that went clear, and now it is this man who is solo with 17.3 Ks to go. Again, he is riding, not in this race of course, but he is currently a stagiaire for the Cofidis team, rides for Team Colorquick, but 22 years of age, and already with a lot of wins on the board, and they've eased up here, 25 seconds. This is going out now, so this is a good move, but right now seemingly no panic, or should I say no willingness to try and bring this back. So again, Denmark up the road. They are the team that has been on the front foot all day long, Jens.
Yeah, they've certainly tried to stay in control of this race by attacking, and at the moment it's working quite well. I think they've had someone in every move we've seen, and now solo out front again. 17 kilometers to go, 25 seconds, just a solo rider. Of course, he does not have the fatigue of that entire stage in the breakaway in his legs. But I think for the sprinters teams, if they can get together, get some control going, it should be controllable, this. Just the gap is still going out now, but 30 seconds over 16, 17 kilometers, that's still doable. But the peloton will have to get their act together and put some riders at the front to chase this down at some point, because it's a fresh rider. It's you know, he'll have more legs left than one of the breakaway riders would have had.
He certainly will. He's looking good at the moment, despite that little bit of a headwind. This is relatively sheltered terrain here, in and out of these little villages. Shelter from these buildings and also from these little bits of wooded areas. And that's what you want. You want that low pressure to pass through if you can as an individual rider. On the hoods here, and it is the German squad. Now, Great Britain, should I say, that are starting to chase behind after getting involved in several of those moves. This is the thing, that there are teams that have sprinters, but also when the racing is on, they're always putting riders in the breakaways at the same time. So they've got an evolving plan just to be where the racing is. But right now, with a 40-second lead, 16 Ks to go, this is certainly a good move. And as you said, relatively fresh legs, Jens, taking the racing line there, just slicing a metre or so off. He is at the moment looking good and looking strong.
Yeah, it's a strong rider, but we did see him adopt that aero position just a few minutes ago. Now he's back onto the drops and slightly higher with his shoulders. Maybe not as practiced in that position as some of the other riders we've seen over the years. But he's still pushing. He's going fast, but it looks like he's feeling the effort already. Maybe wasn't really planning to be out here on his own, but either he has to make it stick or he has to abandon this move. But with 40 seconds, with just 15 kilometers to go, I think he just has to keep going and see where this move takes him.
Yeah, just by, I think you're quite right. I think he went clear. He went clear on his own. There's nobody with him. But given the phase of racing that we're at, he wouldn't have been mistaken in thinking, well, maybe I'll take a little group. But he is now committed. And quite often, when you see a rider adopting this position, it's generally, in the way his head's moving around, it looks like he might have pushed through into the red for a sustained period of time and is now just paying for that initial acceleration. On the drops, it isn't quite as aerodynamic, depending on the rider's frame, etc. The most aero position on a road bike, generally speaking, is when you're on the hoods with your arms at 90 degrees, less of the forearms exposed as he just gets back into that aero tuck. Of course, if you trade in that position a lot, it can be pretty comfy, but if you don't, it can actually be quite uncomfortable, and therefore you just relieve the stress by going onto the drops a little bit more. But still holding steady there, Jens, at 40 seconds.
It does look like he's suffering from that position, still not incredibly aero. I think the gap stabilized now at 40 seconds. I think some of the teams in the bunch have realized that there's someone out front and they have to do something about it. So the pace has gone right up again. It's interesting to see how it just was a full-on attacking phase, and then once one rider got away, it fully shut down. Everyone was just across the road, slowing down. Now it's sped back up again, and I think, yeah, if just 2 or 3 teams get together and try to control this, it should be on for a bunch sprint. But Goodnitz is trying his best, trying to stay up front.
Yeah, Joshua Goodnitz, he's out in front on his own. It's been another intriguing day's racing. This is day 2 of the Tour de l'Avenir, 59th edition of the Race of the Future. We started earlier on today in Nozay, and it won't be too long before we hit the outskirts of the historic town of Chinon. We pass close to the finish line, but not through it, and they do a little loop around the edge of the town and head back in, running parallel to the river Vienne into the finish just on the banks of the river, almost in the shadow of the iconic Chateau de Chinon, the home back in the Middle Ages of none other than Henry II. But from the past to the present day, the chase is now on, and the lead of our solo Danish rider out in front has come down. It is now 35 seconds, just under 4 hours of racing today. This, the longest stage of this Tour de l'Avenir, as we get a reminder of the intermediate classification. Still in the lead of the King of the Mountains, the rider from Luxembourg, Loic Bettendorf, took those points yesterday. Today's only climb was taken by Alexander Vinokourov Jr., I think it's fair to add, of the Kazakhstan team. So no change in that classification, but there could be a change in the GC today. Any riders equal on time, it's basically count back on stages, so we could get a different rider in the yellow jersey today. But right now, it is the man from Denmark out in front, and looking good, but his lead is starting to come down. You can definitely see those shoulders now, Jens, starting to rock and roll ever so slightly.
Yeah, it's I think Goodnitz is going to suffer from the pace in the peloton. It's going a little bit too fast for him to stay out front on his own. He looks to be suffering. But just that point of the GC, it is on countback, so there are 5 riders who are still in the same time who have a chance of taking the yellow jersey, depending on where in that group finish, where in that group they finish. So Voldegger, Villa, Jerry, Pomorski and Bettendorf all finished in the same time yesterday. So if any of those riders finishes far enough ahead of the others, then they could take the yellow jersey, and that will be an extra dynamic in the sprint. We probably won't see them right at the front of that sprint, but in that second sort of row, maybe in 20th position or so, it's something to look for.
Yeah, definitely. As you quite rightly pointed out, they have that 6-second advantage over Rotem, Tene and the rest. Pretty much. I'm just trying to look if there were any. There was a fair few riders out the back, but 40 or 50 riders out of the back. We lost 2 riders unfortunately yesterday, so 159 starters took to the line in Nozay just under 4 hours ago. And right now this man takes a look behind. There is the River Vienne on his right hand side of me, coming on towards the outskirts of the town. They stay on this side of the river. In fact, they don't actually cross over the river, so the river will stay on their right. It then swings left and takes in a loop. With 5 k's to go, there's a right, well, just under 5 k's to go, there's a right-hand turn, and then with 3.5 k's to go, there's a 90-degree right-hander, and that's where the riders will get the wind in their back. But it looks as if Goodnitz is starting to capitulate here. Keeping the same pace as the bunch with that nagging headwind is very difficult, and it does look like with around 10 k's to go, his tenure, Jens, at the front is about to come to an end.
Yeah, it looks like that move is pretty much over now, and we will get into the finish town pretty soon. There will be that final loop, but there are some technical parts to that passage through the finish line, or not quite the finish line, but through the finish town anyway. With around 8 kilometers to go, there'll be a couple corners, which is maybe, well, we're already seeing some movement at the front of the bunch, so either that's teams trying to be in the best position for the sprint, or there could be some more attacks coming. And it does look like the bunch is split. We don't really have a second camera at the back of the peloton, but it does not look like the full peloton is still in this group. I think we've lost a few riders there, just looking at the back of that shot.
Ooh, sorry, those little bits of road furniture are causing me a little bit of alarm and distress. Thankfully they've been signalling. You're quite right, there's definitely been a split. It's a sizable peloton that we've got off the front, but there has been a split. You can just see there's no vehicle directly behind it. The gap to the rest, there's one singular rider on their own. It's either split in the wind or there might have been a crash. We don't know. We haven't had sight. Our eyes have been on the rider out in front. Goodnitz, as you can just see, quite technical here, and as you quite rightly said, as we approach the edge of Chinon and we swing left before we come back on ourselves, we pass through the Jardin Anglais, and there's a hard left then there's a very hard right, then another left, and then we head out towards the far part of the circuit with about 6 kilometers to go. So coming up, there's a real technical section for the best part of a kilometer or so, and that's why the pace is really increased on the front here.
Yeah, I think that's mostly just teams looking for control, but if anyone wants to try and attack, it's either going to be there in that town with about 8 kilometers to go, so coming up really shortly, or in the final 2 kilometers when we do have a tailwind again, which makes it a little bit easier to get off the front of the peloton. But the pace is really high. Maybe some riders have sensed that there are a few riders behind and they want to keep those behind, or it's just trying to position for the sprint.
Yeah, it could be. Again, without any radios, unless they've been looking around, they might not even know. There'll be some of the riders who won't be too sure. This is the little section that we're talking about as we go through Le Jardin Anglais. Several little turns. Gets quite technical in a few moments' time. 8.6 kilometers to go. We are now in Chinon. No time for sightseeing, but there is a definite split in the peloton here. I'd estimate, as we just bend around this corner, and we get a wave from one of the locals. Oh, that's quite a tight one there. It looks like Great Britain are the team now on the front. Denmark not too far away as well. This is the section that I was talking about with its lefts and its rights. The place to be is up in front. Looks like there's about maybe 60 or so, 70 riders still in this front group, which still leaves best part of 80 odd riders behind this split, Jens.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Race Radio has reported 2 consecutive crashes that caused that split, so that does explain it. But that definitely means that some GC riders will be caught behind, maybe some sprinters as well. So they'll just be trying their hardest to get back to the front of the peloton. But with the pace so high, that's going to be really, really difficult. Yeah,
it says that we've got 15 seconds to a lead. I think he's actually been caught, or is he still out in front? I'm sure he was taken back, so just scrub out that little bit of a lead, unless it's the gaps between the 2 groups on the road, because as you said, there has been a big crash. Now we're now, there's the group, so yeah, about 50 or so riders. We can't give you any names of the riders who are in this group. There possibly are some GC riders caught out. And we're coming in now to the last 7.5 kilometers of stage 2 of the Tour de l'Avenir, from Nozay to Chinon. It is all back together. Incredibly, we had the race leader Anders Foldegger, who took the stage win yesterday, and with the maillot jaune on his shoulders was part of a 3-man break that ultimately was taken back. The first rider to wave the white flag was Alexander Vinokourov. Took the mountains points, dropped back to the peloton. It was then the race leader and Alias Turk of Slovenia who were the sole survivors out in front. And then with about 35 kilometers to go, Foldegger went solo, only to be caught with about 25 kilometers to go. There was then a flurry of attacks, none of which stuck. And now with 7Ks to go, as we head just out of the town of Chinon, we'll be looping back in very shortly. We have a reduced peloton. The bunch split by a crash that happened about 5 or 6 kilometers ago. And in the next 10 minutes or so, we'll find out who's going to win this stage 2 of the Tour de l'Avenir. But it is Switzerland on the front at the moment, Jens.
Yeah, Switzerland controlling the pace. We are getting reports that the Belgian GC hope Le Serre has been caught in that crash, still hasn't started up again, so that's not looking great for the Belgian team. But it's not just him, it's definitely more riders. We haven't got the exact numbers of riders caught out in the crash, but it's not a huge peloton anymore here at the front.
No, a couple of the French riders, Rémi Allandé of the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes team, also caught in that crash. We'll get some more information if we can. There, we've just seen that, unsurprisingly, the yellow jersey Anders Foldegger, whatever happens today, whether he loses the jersey or not, will be on the podium as the most combative rider. And to be fair, he deserves it. He really does. He's put on a real show, but he's back in the safety of the peloton, or is he? I haven't seen him in this front group. Cannot confirm either way what position he's in, but it is still Switzerland leading this group now. The gap, I think, that they're showing on the screen there is to the next group on the road. It looks as if there's a small clutch of riders fighting to get back into contention with 5.6Ks to go. And in about 2 kilometers time, they'll loop around and then they'll pick up that gentle tailwind on the run-in to the line. So an absolutely fascinating battle this is going to be. Again, we don't know exactly which riders have missed this split, which riders are here. And if we can get a slightly closer look at these riders, we'll let you know.
It does look like there's a neutral surface car in the gap now, so that does say something about how the gap's developing. It definitely isn't getting smaller.
No, it certainly isn't. You just see Denmark, Germany. Now we're starting to loop round now. So 5 kilometers to go. It looks like France are represented up in front. It is still Switzerland. Now, looking at the Swiss lineup, again, I've been putting you on the spot quite a lot today, which I apologise for. There's the bunch behind, or the remnants of the peloton behind. They were probably at around 15 or 20 seconds. You've got the Michelin neutral service in between. I'd imagine they're going to strip that car out very quickly because the chase is on behind, and there's still enough road, I think, Jens, for that group to make contact.
Yeah, I managed to count about 12 seconds, so it's not a huge gap anymore, and I think some of the teams will be desperately trying to claw this gap back, whereas the teams at the front are just trying to position their sprinters. Switzerland, we had this conversation yesterday. I have no clue who's going to sprint for them. It might just be a GC thing with Jon Christen, who's probably going to be their GC hope. Maybe trying to keep some other riders behind after that crash, but it could just be positioning here.
Well, watch out for the United States. If Luc Lamberty is up there, he would certainly figure. One would imagine that the French team are also well represented by the looks of things here. The best young rider in the white jersey, Pierre Thierry, they're in the blue, riding on home soil, of course. This, the race of the future, 4 kilometers to go, and in about 300 meters, as you can just see the bunch, or the second half of the bunch, should I say, nearly about to make contact. It's going to come at a big cost. I don't think there'll be too many legs fresh enough to participate in the sprint, but in the next 100 meters or so, there's a hard right, and then that will be the road that takes us back into the center of Chinon. Here is that right turn. Thankfully, it's a turn they can take at speed, although one rider nearly gets that one wrong. An unfortunately placed truck just on the corner, but everybody's got round okay, and it does look as if this is going to be sewn back together, Jens.
Yeah, I think a couple riders trying to make use of that turn to close that gap, and I think the important riders who will have saved their legs, who have been worked forward, will get across that gap, but I don't think anyone from that second group is going to position themselves in time for a sprint. It'll be the riders at the front. It looks like Israel is well represented here. Same for the Denmark, France, and Germany. Some other riders may be caught out, but these are some of the great sprinters that we've got here. I haven't seen Lamperti so far, so that's one rider to look out for. I do see a couple of US jerseys in that second group, so maybe he's been caught behind that crash.
Indeed. Well, one team that are present, you can see them on the left-hand side, they're right, and that is the Israeli team looking after Oded Kogut, one of the fastest riders around. He looks to be in about 4th or 5th wheel at the moment. The Netherlands also represented just in the centre, and then the ever-present Danes, and also I think there's the under-23 Italian road race champion in the mix I can see floating around as well. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side of the road, as we look at it, it is Great Britain. 2.3 kilometres to go now.
Not too far to go anymore for this sprint preparation. It looks like this group is going to sprint for the win, unless someone takes a late flyer. I think this is going to be the sprint. We've got probably most of the sprinters in this group, and it'll be the only real sprint stage we'll see this whole week. So it's an important one, and there'll be pressure for the biggest sprinters in this group.
And this is absolutely fascinating stuff. 2Ks to go now. As another rider swings off, and the pressure still being applied on the front by Great Britain. Now the colour blocking has just gone away that we saw a few moments ago. The Israeli team looked to have been swept aside. It is Great Britain on the front. They've got some fast riders amongst their number. Watch out for Max Walker. Also maybe Rob Donaldson as well. Both of those riders are super fast. Not too sure which one will be protected today. coming in very shortly to the final kilometre of this race. Once they go through the Flamme Rouge, the road continues to go straight. There's then a little gentle left-hander which turns into a right-hander, and then with about 250 metres to go, the finish line opens up. But this is fast. That group has now come back together. We've got the vast majority of riders still together. This is going to be fast and furious here. Hold on to your hats, Jens.
Yeah, and it's chaotic as well. There's very few riders with their whole team together. It's just individuals trying to position themselves. It looks sort of like an even younger category sprint with no team cooperation at all. The French team have got a couple riders, but there's very little cooperation coming up now, and we're really, really close to the finish, I think.
Yep, coming up to the finish very, very shortly. The fact we're surrounded in trees looks like we're right on the edge of the town. There is the exit sign to Chinon, but of course on the other side of the road, that means we're now entering the town once more. Nozay to Chinon, 195 k's. What a stage it has been so far. The Maillot Jaune went out. This is the lead out now. We're coming into the last couple of 100 metres. It is a big lead out in the centre for the Israel team, but coming around on the left-hand side is France as well. Wow, in the centre there looks like one of the Poles as well. What a sprint this is going to be. But on the right-hand side looks like it's going to be Israel in the centre. Oh, one of the Polish riders thinks he's won. Also one of the Canadians thinks he's won as well. That was Riley Pickrell, I think, in the centre. An absolute blanket finish here. Two riders thought they'd won that one. It looked like that was between Israel, Poland and Canada. Well, pick the bones out of that one, Jens. One thing is for sure, that was an absolute thriller. Couldn't call it. Very close. That will go down to a photo finish.
Yeah, I do think one of the Polish riders definitely set up too early. It looks like it might be Riley Pickrell who's taken the stage at the last minute. This is a group coming in with probably some of the GC favourites who have lost some time. I do see Archie Ryan in there with a torn sleeve. That's just one of them, but there will be more riders who crashed out about 20 kilometers ago. But a really chaotic sprint. We'll have to see that again right now with one of the Poles who let it out from a long way to go, but just sitting up too early. Thinking he's won, and he's definitely got passed by the Canadian there, and I'd have to say I think it's Riley Pickrell who's won this stage.
Yep, I think it is indeed Riley Pickrell. He was up there in the top 10 yesterday. Riders still crossing the lines in ones and twos. Not actually seen, I'm not too sure if he was in the front group. We obviously had our eyes on the very front to see who was going to take that chaotic sprint here in Chinon. We'll get confirmation soon, but I do indeed think it is the man from Canada who took the win. Well, that was a learning process, wasn't it? Never put your arms up. It happens at the top level, though, doesn't it? But a double celebration, but only one of them is going to be cast in gold, and it looks subject to confirmation as if Canada are going to take stage 2, and Riley Pickrell should be the man. Again, we'll wait for confirmation of that one as the riders continue to file home here to the applause of this crowd assembled to see the stars of the future. Another sizable group rounds the bend at the top of the screen. Ireland, Kazakhstan, Poland all rolling through here. Just over 4 hours of racing here, and we're still waiting for confirmation, but I do think that it was Riley Pickrell who took the win there. Just shows never put your arms up until you know 100% that you've got it. A little bit of exuberance, a little bit of overconfidence there. Whoever the Polish rider was, he's going to rue that day, that is for sure.
Yeah, it's a very painful lesson for the Polish rider. I'm not too sure who it was. They've got a couple fast finishes, but no one who I would have expected to win this stage in the mass sprint. I think the Israeli rider in second place was not their main sprinter. It was Tene again, same rider who won that bunch sprint behind the breakaway yesterday. Gogo seemed to sort of miss out and just behind his teammate in sort of fourth or fifth place, but we'll have to see a photo finish or at least a result sheet to confirm exactly who was where.
Exactly. Well, we're getting information through, but subject confirmations, it does look like it is indeed Riley Pickrell, the 22-year-old from Victoria in Canada, who took the stage win. He rides for the Continental Israel Premier Tech Academy team, but has signed a 2-year contract to go up to the next level, which is no surprise. Had a good season so far. A very strong season indeed. It is indeed Riley Pickrell who took the win ahead of Radoslav Fratiak of Poland, Rotem Tenney in third, Oded Kogut, should I say, for Israel in fourth, so 3 and 4 for the Israel team. Vlad van Mechelen of Belgium in fifth, Tim Tom Tuttenberg from Germany in sixth, Bostian Mørn of Slovenia in seventh, Adam Holm Jorgensen there in eighth place for the Danish team, who were really on the offensive today, that's for sure. So we'll have to wait and see how that affects the general classification. It will be on countback. It could be very close between the Israeli rider and Riley Pickrell on who takes the maillot jaune. I'm not going to call this one, but they are going to be very close on points, that is for sure. And I'm not even going to gamble, Jens, with my rudimentary mathematics. I'm going to leave it to the experts to tell us definitively who is going to be leading this race as we head into the team time trial tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll have to see who of those breakaway riders of yesterday are still in we're still in that bunch. It's hard to say without very detailed results.
Exactly.
But someone will tell us at some point, I assume, and otherwise the results will be on the internet at some point. But it's pretty sure that Riley Pickrell won that stage today.
Yeah, Riley Pickrell, superb win, took a stage of the Baby Giro last year, and plenty of consistent results as well. 8th on the opening stage of the Tour de l'Avenir yesterday. As we look at highlights of another action-packed day at the Race of the Future. Under blue skies, they started off earlier today in Nozay, direction Chinon, moving from the Loire Atlantique department to Indre-et-Loire on the banks of the River Vienne. The opening few Ks were pretty active. We eventually got a breakaway of 3 riders that went clear.
Okay.
And the final man standing was in fact the yellow jersey. Big surprise, I think it's fair to say, for many, but the way that Denmark were riding today, they were always on the offensive. They certainly weren't a team that was going to be happy to leave it to a bunch sprint. Eventually, the leader, Foldager, was caught, taken back by the peloton and replaced by a teammate. In fact, at this point, it was Adam Holm Jorgensen who went clear with Van Belle of the Netherlands. Furious chasing behind by the peloton. Another attack by a Danish rider, which ultimately came to nothing. And this was that moment. This was Gundnitz, Joshua Gundnitz, who went clear, opened up a lead of around 15 or 20 seconds. There was a crash which split the peloton. It all came back together for a rampaging bunch sprint. It looked like the pole in the centre had taken this one. He certainly thought so, but ultimately, with a late lunge to the line and the second definitive punch of the year, it was Riley Pickering of Canada who opens his account in this year's Tour de l'Avenir. And there is confirmation. And that's also the general classification, provisional general classification. It looks like Riley Pickrell was moved into the yellow jersey ahead of Radoslav Fratiak of Poland, Rotem Tenney in third, Oded Kogut in fourth. It doesn't look, based on what we've seen, that anybody of the breakaway yesterday was in that front split, but this is subject to confirmation. Here is our race winner.
So avec le vainqueur,
And with the winner,
Royal
Riley?
Sprint today.
Yeah, it was.
What a sprint.
Wow. It was the only sprint day left, and we went all in today. I think a lot of teams did. Canada, US, Germany, us, like, we went all in, and I'm just so happy to deliver it for the boys. It was a crazy sprint.
Merci.
Well, a short but sweet interview there. It was indeed a crazy sprint. Had us on the edge of our seats. It certainly had everybody here enthralled by what unfolded in the last 250 metres. I think that's what characterises this under-23 racing. I've enjoyed this two-day journey so far. Of course, this race carries on tomorrow. We have a team time trial, 26.5 Ks from Vatan to Issoudun. Small climb on the circuit, certainly not a flat affair. Intermediate split at 14.5 Ks. It does look as if Canada will be the last team off. If we do get confirmation that the young Canadian Riley Pickerel is indeed in the Maillot Jaune. Remember, it's worth reminding you there are no time bonuses on offer on the road stages here. And again, a look at the classification, provisional general classification as we head into stage 3. Pickerel leads ahead of Frecak, Tene, Kogut, and Milchen, Teutenberg, Mern, Jorgensen, Huens and Bussato. All locked on at the same time. But that should change tomorrow.
Yeah, I was just looking through the finish line images again, and it does look like Bettendorf made it into that front split, so I'm not quite sure if that's the stage classification, but...
oh, here we go. Yeah.
Avec Loïc qui
Good
garde
spot.
son maillot de la montagne, ça a été une très très longue journée, très chaude journée.
Oui, c'était très long.
A long day, a hot day. You've kept the jersey à point.
C'était très nerveux dans le peloton.
It's really nervous in the peloton.
Je pense une grande chute.
There's a big, I think there's a big crash, but it was okay for us.
Demain, vous le gardez
but
puisque c'est
I've kept the
contre la
jersey.
montre, donc place à la montagne maintenant.
Oui, c'est bien.
See, you've got the contract to want to probably keep tomorrow. So you're going to keep the jersey for another day.
Merci Loïc, qui garde son maillot du classement de la montagne.
Well, as you say, if he was spotted in that front group, he has that 5-second advantage. So we'll wait and see what happens there. So good spot there, Jens. But if that is indeed the case, he won't only be in the mountains jersey. He'll be in the lead of this race as well, subject to confirmation, of course.
Yeah, of course, it is possible that someone else made it in there as well. It's very hard to see just on that finish image whether one of the other breakaway riders made it in. So it is possible that someone else has got the yellow jersey, but we'll have to figure that out. Just based on someone from that breakaway yesterday being in the front group, that with the lack of bonus seconds, that does mean that at least Bettendorf or someone else from the breakaway will take the yellow jersey, but we'll just have to wait and see who it is.
We will indeed. Well, thank you very much for joining us here on GCN Plus. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you join us tomorrow. We're on slightly earlier tomorrow. We're on back at 2 o'clock British time. That's 1500 hours Central European time. Different start times as we move through the week. So tomorrow is the team time trial. Then you've got a couple of stages for the puncheurs as we head deeper into the week. So stage 4, far more up and down as we head towards Evo-les-Bains. And then towards the back end of the week, things get very hilly. So here we go. We've got a new classification general. Michal Pomorski takes the lead of this race ahead of Giacomo Villa and Bettendorf. So they were there, and Pierre Thierry, they were the 3-4 riders in the move. So after disappointment on missing out on the stage win, because let's be honest, he celebrated too early, Michal Pomorski will be on the podium, and he will be clad in the Maillot Jaune tomorrow. So a slightly, well, certainly not fortuitous, but there's a silver lining for that slightly early celebrations day, because Poland have the yellow jersey.
Yeah, Frecak will be kicking himself for celebrating too early, but there'll be mixed feelings in the Polish team with Pomorski in the end taking the yellow jersey ahead of the team time trial tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a great ride by Pomorski. Well, that was the stage from Nozay to Chinon. What a brand new yellow jersey in the shape of Pomorski, and a jubilant stage winner there from Canada. Absolutely fantastic win there for Riley Pickerel. But that's really the last of the super flat stages, as he illustrated, or as he explained, should I say. No more real opportunities for bunch sprints. We head into hilly, punchy terrain. Got a couple of mountaintop finishes and some big stages to split things up. So this race now properly getting underway, and the team trial set for tomorrow. And the Poland will be the last team off.
Yeah, they will be. Not the favourites, definitely, but there'll be some bigger nations trying to take the stage win. But I think they'll try their hardest just to hold on to that jersey. I think there'll be some motivated riders in there, just missing out on the stage win today. But being close both days, it's quite an impressive feat for that Polish team, which really didn't come into this race as the favourites either in sprint stages or for the overall.
No, certainly not. I'm sure they'll be pretty happy with that. As you say, bittersweet feelings within the Polish camp tonight, I think. But they'll reconfigure and they will start off last of the 28 teams starting this edition of the race. Riders continue to file home to a ripple of applause. But in a few moments' time, I don't think we're going to cut through to the podium. And just thank you again for joining us, and make sure you join us through the rest of the week as we head ever nearer, of course, to the Vuelta a España. Starts on Saturday, and you can see pretty much wall-to-wall coverage of the third Grand Tour of the year. What a lineup we have for the Vuelta this year. Primoz Roglic, Jonas Vingegaard, the defending champion Remco Evenepoel, Geraint Thomas, to name but a few. Juan Ayuso as well, the big Spanish hope for the final Grand Tour of the year. So a lot of racing still to come. But we're going to take our leave now. But please do join us again tomorrow for more action on stage 3 of the Tour de l'Avenir, when it's Team Time Trial time. As we get just ignore that one. That is the classement of the stage.